So what exactly will happen to Thrawn and Ezra after Star Wars Rebels Season 4? We know Dave Filoni has confirmed that they lived through the jump to hyperspace, and Timothy Zahn wants to write the story of their survival. But what exactly could that story be? Well, I have 7 ideas for you today, the first of which is the traditional Gladiator scenario. Thrawn and Ezra are captured by aliens and forced to fight as gladiators. Now, some of you might think Ezra is far too powerful to be captured, but just think of Thor and Thor Ragnarok. If he can be captured and made a gladiator, I'm sure Ezra can too. Of course, in Star Wars Rebels, we did see that Thrawn is quite the fighter, and he's just an overall strategic genius, so we'd get to see Thrawn and Ezra as gladiators, and then their great escape. But let's move on to my next idea, and it's sort of this classic Star Wars Voyager-like scenario, where Thrawn and Ezra and the crew of the Chimera repair the ship and are journeying back to known space. Again, from Thrawn alliances, we know that Ezra would be able to use his force powers to navigate system to system, but they wouldn't be able to take a hyperspace jump directly back to Lothal. Plus, there would always be the problem of fuel and other resources. And then, of course, they would probably come across people who would need help, and Ezra would no doubt force Thrawn and the Chimera crew into helping those people. But moving on here, there's also the scenario of Thrawn and Ezra shipwrecked on a dangerous planet. I love this person versus nature scenario where there's maybe creatures attacking the Chimera, or Thrawn and Ezra holding out against those creatures. Maybe it's a jungle planet and the jungle slowly starts to take over the Chimera as they're trying to repair it. Or as I detailed in a similar theory, Thrawn and Ezra have to go into the jungle up to an elevated position so that they can send out a distress signal. And of course, they would be hunted by the local jungle creatures as they do that. It certainly doesn't sound like something for kids, but I think it'd make for an interesting story regardless. So let's move on to number 4. I also like the idea of seeing Thrawn, Ezra, and some Imperials as sort of this Magnificent Seven scenario. That Chimera has crash landed and the locals of a smallish town will award Thrawn and Ezra a spaceship if they can defend the town versus the planet's marauding bandits. I like this idea because it gives Thrawn a chance to show his strategic genius, of course, and Ezra working under Thrawn's strategic genius, being able to use his Jedi powers. And overall, I just love this Magnificent Seven scenario, where you have this group of soldiers trying to hold out against the bandits. And I also have another similar story, sort of like this, where Thrawn and Ezra would need to defeat a monster. Again, Thrawn and Ezra crash land on an inhabited planet and are taken to a nearby town. They have no credits and no resources to sell, but they decide to embark on a quest to hunt down a local monster for a serious reward. This could get really interesting, especially if they have absolutely no resources such as weapons. Again, it might be a little too scary for an animation show, but it would be really cool to see Thrawn and Ezra use their different ways of thinking to help overcome this monster. But let's move on to number 6. I like the idea of a war movie type of scenario where Thrawn and Ezra are thrust into the middle of the Chiss Civil War, which was hinted at in Thrawn Alliances. Early on in this story, we could see Thrawn convince Ezra that he must help him defeat the Grisk and win this Chiss Civil War. And as Ezra progresses through this story, we could see him become wary of the war and the fight as it drags on. I'm not really sure where that story would go, so let's move on to number 7, in which Thrawn and Ezra discover a Jedi-like order of monks, which allow Ezra to develop his Force powers, and Thrawn to rediscover some of his Force powers, which I know might be a bit of a surprise for you guys, but it was hinted at in Thrawn Alliances that Thrawn previously, as a young child, may have actually had Force powers. So it'd be interesting to see both of these characters sort of challenged by these monks and developing some Force powers. But that said, what do you think about today's speculation? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, answer today's question of the day. What sort of story do you think Thrawn and Ezra should have after Star Wars Rebels Season 4? Thanks for watching Star Wars Speculation, your home for serious speculation that isn't supposed to be taken too seriously. And as always, may the Force be with you.